Hi everybody, welcome to today's Transformation Talk. I'm here today with stone sculptor Molly Greist, who I met at last year's Miss Foundation conference. And I did a breakout session with her, and not only was it an amazing personal experience, I got really excited because Molly's story is a beautiful example of what happens when we follow that inner voice, that inner knowing, that inner craving in the midst of grief. And so I'm thrilled that you are here today, Molly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I would love to just share your story with everyone today, starting with your son Peter's death in 1989. So can you tell us a little bit about what happened, just briefly with him and how you began to work with stone?
Well, okay, without going in too many different directions at once, it was an automobile accident, and we were coming back from a trip from California over the Siskiyous, and a big semi-tractor trailer rig lost its brakes and rear-ended us. And in that impact, our son Peter, who was 10 months old at the time, was thrown out of the car. And so I'm going to tell in this something I don't normally say and tell about, but I think it's important. At the time of that accident, something happened other than the loss of Peter, because I believe that some part of me went with him. Because my recollection of what actually happened at that time is very different than, in fact, what did happen. Because I remember distinctly continuing to drive over open space as if I was driving over this huge ravine.
Wow.
And there was a lot of warmth and a lot of light in the car with us. We were in a Volkswagen van. It was one of my older sisters, our daughter, and Peter. And I was driving, and I just had this feeling of calm. I could look down. I could see all these things down below, and I'm just driving along in the midair and just thinking, so this is what it's like. And I just felt at peace. We're all together, and it didn't, in that time, it did not occur to me that the vehicle was actually being spun around and on its side on the freeway.
Wow.
But so I obviously was unconscious during that period of time, and I just have to believe that a part of myself was with Peter. And anyway, came to on the freeway. Another interesting thing happened because I was sort of counting noses, and the first thing I recognized was that Peter was not in the car. And I had to sort of climb out of a side window, and I started up the road. There was construction being done, and so there was one of those concrete medians road, and also along the side. But I just started running up that thing, and it was like, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" is what I was calling out. And so man just sort of swept me. And I say, like an angel, I mean, he just swept me under his wing, obviously into his arm, turned me to go back down the freeway, and said, "You don't want to see that baby now."
Oh.
Said, "Yeah." And for some unknown reason, it's like I just took it in, and I just thought, okay. And then it was like, okay, where's my daughter? Yeah. Where's my sister? And he brought me back to the car itself. Our daughter was being attended by people who had stopped, and it was something about that. Those two things. I don't often say about the feeling of that car just driving through space. But later have come to realize that I think that was an important moment. And then to trust enough in this stranger to just sweep me up like that, not fight, to get back to the baby. It was like I just knew somehow he was in heaven. And so that was the accident. And then, of course, fast forward, it didn't take long to, recognize the connection with his name, Peter. And that name actually means rock or stone. It comes from Petros. And so I started making really strong connections with rocks and stones. They were here at home. And I was drawn to this one particular big stone on our property that when we had first moved there and we're putting up some fencing for the animals, we had to go around it because it was too big to move it. But I was drawn back to that stone. And it became a really quiet and peaceful place for my husband and I to go when there were lots of people coming in and out of the house. And then I had a friend. Well, actually, I started digging that stone up as a kind of. Maybe I'm just sort of a physical person, but I needed to be doing something that was very physical. So the first thing was I'm going to go dig that rock up. I mean, it's a big stone. So it took a fair amount of digging, and in that process of digging, it was as if I was digging down into myself. And I made connections not only with our son's name, but also with I felt like I was going back to my own beginnings to find something that I could just really, hold on to, something I could believe in again. And digging into the earth really worked for me in that instance. And I just remember feeling really strongly that, gosh, we're made of the same stuff. The stones and the earth and us. And so that it began to really work from down deep inside of me. And it was obvious as friends came around, they were aware of the fact that I was doing this. And one of my good friends told me about, the accident actually happened on my birthday, that June 14th, 1989. So by September, I had dug up the stone. Peter's birthday was August 19th. In fact, he was just 25 this past August 19th. And we had the stone moved by his birthday that year. So come September, school was starting. This friend of mine knew about a stone sculpture that was going to be dedicated up at one of the schools by a well-known Northwest artist. And she knew I was kind of getting into this rock stuff. And she thought that might be something I would be interested in. And so I rode my bike up there and stood there with all the parents and the students and the teachers as the sculptor was sort of, introducing and telling about his stone before it was unveiled. And when it was unveiled, it was just like, I was just drawn right into that stone. And he stood, the sculptor stood there like as if he was chiseling in the air. And he was saying to the teachers and the parents, he was saying, if your job is not to help these children find themselves, you have no business being here. And it was like revealed, the stone uncovered, and then I was drawn in. And I realized at that time, I had to find a hammer and chisel. That was the next step. I had to start carving the stone, not just digging it up. And so I waited till all the children had their chance to talk to the artist and so on. And then I went up, and he had written a book. It was mostly beautiful images of his work, and then some of his insights and wisdom and inspiration. And so I had gotten a copy, and I wanted to have him sign it. Alana, I don't have no idea what I actually said to him. But something to the effect that he got the idea I had lost a son recently. And he signed it to Peter. He put in the book to Peter. And the title of the book is The Spirit in the Stone. The artist is James W. Washington, Jr. He has since passed away. But I says, I really want to start carving stone. And I remember that he said, protect your eyes. Protect your eyes. And then apart from that, it was like, okay, now what? Where do I get my tools and all that? And I did not get any of that information at that point. But I started thinking about it just with this intense feeling from within, like, I've got to do this. And so I thought, well, University of Washington is not that far away, and they teach sculpture. And so I went over and found a set of chisels and a hammer, and brought them home. And I went into the backyard and found some pieces of stone that I had dug up while digging up the big stone. That big stone had obviously been there. It was like the mother rock. It had been there for long enough to begin exfoliating. Huh. And it had been brought in by glacier. So I took some of the pieces that were around it, and I just started hammering and chiseling. I did get a space shield, and I was amazed you could actually do something with the hammer and chisel. But very quickly they became dull, and I didn't have a way to sharpen them, so I had to find somebody to help me with that. Then I discovered that I was carving granite, and it's one of the hardest stones there is to carve, and it's very rough on your tools. And so I soon found out I needed to get tools that had carbide set into the tips. And I also had to get a bench grinder so I could sharpen them myself and stuff like that. But it was just that kind of thing, Alana. It was like it was not anyone telling me this is what you need to do or whatever. It was like it was just coming up from within me, and I had to do it. I just had to do it. I was very fortunate in all of that sort of stone path. I also was doing a lot of other things, including just, if I'd see something in the newspaper about a lecture or something, that was interesting, and I would just go. And I met a very special person by doing that, who it turned out she ended up being a counselor for me. And the interesting thing was that she was working with me because she could see that the stonework was already working, and she was just encouraging me to do that. And so we had a trade going. I would carve stones, and she has some of my finest pieces, really. And she believed that's what was going to help me through this process. And so instead of treating me as something that was broken and she would be happy to help fix me, it was more like, no, there is something within that is working. Let's work with that. And that was a real gift. That was a real gift. And so I only had that as a feeling. We didn't talk about things in that way. In fact, I say, Alana, now, if I knew what I know now then, it would not have been a good thing. It's really a lot of what I have learned over the years has been like affirmation of things that had come up in just from within me. And I have to believe that there is something within all of us that if we have the courage to listen to that inner voice, it's unerring. And there were enough things that were still working within me like that. And then these affirmations, whether it was a book I would read or something that someone would say, or this stonework was incredible, because not only was it just like the physical thing that I was telling you about, the hammering and the chiseling, that chip, 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 and then the lifting and the moving of those stones. And they got heavier, they got bigger, and they got heavier. And I know all of that now. It was really important because grief is not just in your head. Mm-hmm. And it's not just in your heart. Wherever those holes feel, it is in your entire system. Mm-hmm. And so it needs to be treated in that, a whole system, synergistic sort of way. And it's like I said, it's sort of afterwards and sort of as an affirmation, acknowledging that, by gosh, that lifting and that moving is like, it's a great metaphor for how heavy is your grief. And there's a certain point where it is so darn heavy, you cannot lift it. You cannot move it by yourself. You've tried the fulcrums and the levers and all of those, those things, and it still is not moving. So you can ask for help. Mm-hmm. Help. And then with two or more, or with that help that you have asked for, the stone begins to move. And that's, I think it's a wonderful and important analogy, a metaphor, from my perspective anyway. So there's that. There's the lifting and the moving. And then there's also recognizing that there is, in fact, a sort of spirit in that stone. We often think of stones as inanimate objects, but in fact there is life and spirit in that stone. And that's where I just like zoom the camera out, and it's like becoming what that stone is, in a sense, or recognizing that it's part. I mean, like I said earlier, we're made of the same stuff. And it's like that the geological time, the time of eternity and earth and its beginnings, and all of that is very important, because it helped me appreciate that I'm only a tiny little part of a whole. And so is that Peter. And it's like it's like I began to feel more grateful to be a part of this greater whole. And in that gratitude was able to, find all kinds of things to hold on to and work with. The tools were infinite. And I just couldn't help but feel that it was important to acknowledge that sense of gratitude about life and death is part of life. And it was like witnessing almost the fact that I am part of this whole cycle of things. And it doesn't take much to look around. I love being in the nature. Whether it's in my own garden or in the forest or whatever, you have the seasons. You have so many reminders of life and death and the cycle of things like that. And it's just, to me, it was, yes, Peter's life seemed ended way too soon. And there is great loss in that. Trust me, I do feel the loss. But at the same time, acknowledging that I have been witness to a greater sensibility about life. And I am still part of that. And so it's important to honor that to me and live well into that life as best I can, becoming who I am and why I'm here as best I can.
I mean, it's just a beautiful story. It's so heartbreaking, obviously. The death of a child is horrifying. And yet you just illustrate so beautifully that sense of following that inner calling to a sense of gratitude, to a sense of purpose. And I know that you didn't hit the gratitude. It's not like your son died and you felt grateful. Like we're talking a process, right? Of time and work and grief and unearthing, and It's such a lovely story. And in fact, there's a documentary that was made about your story, which is available on your website, called Grief is More Than Crying. And I have yet to see it. I really look forward to that.
It's actually, my son-in-law helped me download it so you can actually view it through the website. It's not that great. But if you do that and you'd like to, have a copy of it or whatever, I can send you a really good copy of it. But you can get a sense of it just by going to the website, and it's just mollygreist.com, and you can play it and see what you think. And that was, like I said, it's 24 years ago now. Peter would have been 25 on his birthday, August the 19th. So that was, a lot of work has been done. But most of the time along the way, I didn't really think of it so much as work as this is what I have to do. Mm-hmm. This is my calling. And I didn't really finish saying something about the stonework besides that, chipping away and the lifting and the moving. And there's that spirit in the stone. I also now carve headstones. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole nother part of the process, still part of my process, but at a place where I just feel so honored to be able to walk with these other people. And I will still say that finding the right stone is the first step. Mm-hmm. And it has just been an amazing journey. It's really been a growth for me to be able to now turn and walk with these other people through this process. And so that's been a real gift in itself.
Mm-hmm. And you do, because most of your work is actually in private collections, is that right?
That's correct. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And cemeteries.
And cemeteries. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I was lucky enough to experience some of your craft. You showed us when we did the workshop at the Miss Foundation conference. We tried moving some pretty big stones, at least as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
It was so interesting because not something, I'm very physical too, but moving stone is not something that I've ever felt that calling to do. And it was really beautiful because I could see how the extreme physicality of it could be really, really powerfully healing. And, our brains were engaged, like you showed us, like, okay, look at the stone and look at which, where it's going to move more easily. And it was just fascinating. It was definitely something I've never thought about before. And the physicality of it was really, really neat to experience. And then we walked the labyrinth too. So that was powerful. And I have some beautiful pictures of that. So I'll post one with this, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the labyrinth and where that came in for you and your use of ritual and walking the labyrinth in your own path.
Well, of course, you can understand and appreciate the labyrinth is a beautiful metaphor for not just the grief process, but life itself. And the one thing that I love about, or one of the things I love about a labyrinth versus a maze, is that if you stay on the path, you cannot get lost. The way in is also the way out. And it's also like in the context of family, if you start walking the labyrinth, and there's a point where it takes a turn, and the person who's walking along behind you actually ends up being beside you, and they're going the opposite direction. And imagine that. You know how that is in your family context or friends. There are times when you are grieving, you're in a place where it feels like you are going in a completely opposite direction than anyone else. But lo and behold, You come back around, and you're walking together again. And so I actually had a really wonderful opportunity at one of the schools here on Bainbridge to build a labyrinth. It's about 60 feet across, and it's all stones that were found on the site of the school. It was a new school being built, and I had the men working. I had them save all of the stones. And we had a huge pile of rocks at the back of the playground there. And so it took about 2 years, and I had a great big one set where it ended up being center. And so I actually had to work my way out from the center. And that in itself, Alana, became an interesting metaphor, because it took a couple of years to get all these stones in place. And then in that process, I started thinking, there are these times when I just have felt really like I was going a different direction than all my friends, all my family, whatever. And what I took from that was that I was starting from the center and working my way out. And everybody else is moving into the center. That's ultimately where we want to get to. And in that process, that's one reason why I mentioned that thing about the time of the accident. I believe I actually had been to the center. That place where we all ultimately are going. And so I had this rare opportunity to build sort of a new life, if you want to use this metaphor, from the center out. And then at some point along the way, I recognized that, by gosh, I can turn around now and start walking again with my friends and with my family back into the center. And it was just it was a really good feeling to know that I wasn't just this odd person who had had this terrible thing happen. It's like, no, it's a choice now. I can turn around and I can walk with you. And ultimately, now there's this fantastic labyrinth at the school that I can go up to any day of the school year, and the children are they play in it. It's part of the playground. And they make up games. Some of them run it and do just exactly as the path dictates, but some of them are using the stones to walk on instead of in between the stones. And it's just, you can't imagine the joy that gives me to see that happening. And my belief is that we have created a space for the children to play in that I don't have to explain, this is a labyrinth, this is what, the symbolism is this and that. Children understand things like that. They just get it. And by being in it. So that's a kind of special way of thinking about being in life. It's like we can get it if we can just be in it. It's all around us. And this beautiful space it's here for us, but we have to be present in it to receive all of what it has to offer. If you just scurry around through it, you miss a lot, I think.
Well, I agree. There's something, there was something really special about that moment walking the labyrinth at the conference. It felt like one of the most grounded, peaceful, present moments of the weekend for me.
It's also fun to learn how to draw a labyrinth. Let's say that old Crete labyrinth, the 7-circuit labyrinth. It's actually quite easy to draw it and to lay one out. And that too, it's engaging a whole different part of you, but it can be sort of a meditation in itself, drawing it. And then I had just drawn that labyrinth that we walked there at the conference, but I have also done something which I have used in workshops where I have laid out a circuit in our backyard, right? And a labyrinth, and I have taken string and cut each piece of string as it's one that connects. So you start with a cross, essentially, in school. Anyway, the little pieces of string, you can, a couple of people, one person one end, one person the other, you can actually start laying out the circuits like that. And I've done it in a proportion so that you can walk it when you're done.
Oh, neat.
Something about that too. It's sort of the tying in that physical. You have to move around a little bit to get that string out and stuff like that. But you look at what you did, and it's like, that's something. You created this beautiful design, and now you add a little ritual into that and walk it. Walk your talk, so to speak.
Well, I think there's something, even if you don't understand all the later layers, I think we can sense them. Just in our being, we can just sense it's a powerful, metaphorical moment.
Yes.
So,
and that goes for, like you recognized, the walking of it. Mm-hmm. So let's add into that the building of it or the creating of that space, and a little bit of meditation and ritual, and you've got a very nice little package of a healing opportunity there. So
yeah, it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm going to ask you my final 3 questions here. The first one is, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the world, what would it be?
Well, I don't know how global this would, the ultimate effect this would have, but if I had a magic wand, I'd like for it, first of all, to be pocket size, so I could bring it out when I need it. This can't be just a one-time deal, because I would love to be able to just tap people on the shoulder and remind them of their light, and to believe and trust in that, and just and hope. So there's believing and trusting and having hope. If I could just tap a person on the shoulder and they would just go bing, they would get it. And I think if more people walked around with the sense of belief and trust and hope, that would change the world.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. Yeah. So. What brings you the most joy?
Well, I sort of like, what's your favorite movie or what's your favorite book? And that changes. It changes. And so right now in this time, I have to say, what brings me the greatest joy is the fact that my daughter is expecting, due in October, and she is so happy to be pregnant and be bringing this new life into the world. It's just, oh my gosh, it's so joyful being around her. And then I get to be a grandmother, and it can't help but put a smile on my face. That brings me great joy. Mm. Now, as far as sort of a more general sense of joy, of course I love working with my stones and being with stones, looking for stones, and I love being in my garden. Mm. I love being outside in my garden. So.
Yeah, all of those. They just bring a smile to my face even hearing about them. So
it's just great joy.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on becoming a grandmother. That sounds just really beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Alana.
What is one, aside from being a stone sculptor, what is one fun or interesting thing about you that makes you uniquely you?
Oh, let's see. I love to ride my bicycle, and I have sort of a collection of bicycles. I think of bicycles not only as transportation, but it's I mean, if someone thought of me, if you thought of me and you pictured me on a bicycle, which might seem a little strange for a 62-year-old woman, but that would make me happy, and if you made that association. Otherwise, yes, it's rock woman. That makes me pretty darn unique.
It does. So does the size of your forearms, just from working with the rocks.
So, no, it's good. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. And I think it does set me apart a little.
Yeah. Clearly it does. And it's such a, like I said, such a beautiful story. It's such an illustration of what I try and remind people when they're first walking into grief, is follow that voice inside, and who knows what kind of magical place it will take you.
Yeah, and I think, somebody might look at you if you said that to them, and there are ways of getting them to hear it without having to say it. Mm-hmm. That's what I was getting at, is it's almost like create the echo, be that so their own voice, because they aren't hearing it this way, but if you can somehow create that shell or whatever, their voice will bounce off and come back to them. So it's really their voice that they're hearing, mm-hmm. but you have helped them hear it. Mm-hmm. And I know you do that in your work. Mm-hmm. So, anyway.
Well, thank you again, Molly. It's mollygreist.com. You can see some of her work there and watch a little bit of the documentary and find out more.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure talking with you again. Have a beautiful day.
You too. Thank you.